And now if anyone wants to share something, the mic, the floor is open.
I just wanted to share something which I experienced myself. This was, and Rabbi Sudak's, Oval Shalom's, his Ivigegebenkeit, so to the Moisid, which something which I saw, which really left a very, very strong impression on me. And this was, I got it was not, and for Pesach. And then later it came the next year, I was going to London for Pesach. And I had a schus that I would get, and that I would get matzah from the Rebbe for the Sidorim. But because I was going to London for Pesach, I was worried that I wouldn't have that opportunity. Now, meanwhile, Rabbi Sudak was in New York, and this was Yudaf Nissen time. So Rabbi Sudak was in New York, and the Rebbe would give Rabbi Sudak matzah to take back for everybody in London. And at that time, there were some financial difficulties in the Moished in Lubavitch in London. And I remember that Rabbi Groner called me over, and he said that Rabbi Sudak is going back to London even before he could get the matzah from the Rebbe personally, because he had to pay, and he wanted to make sure that all the teachers and the staff are paid before Pesach. So he gave up the schus of being able to get matzah miyodak doish from the Rebbe, and he left to London, I think, 24 hours before, only because he had the achrayis to make sure that the wages are paid. And at the end of Baruch Hashem, I was able to, to get matzah from the Rebbe, which went to London. But I just wanted to mention here that we know Rabbi Sudak's his kashrus, and as the shliach of the Rebbe here to London, and he 24 hours before he left, because of the achlais that he had for the Mesid, and he gave up the pasha to receive the matzah miyoda agdosha as he would every year.
Thank you, Rabbi Yunik. And son Rabbi Chaim Jacobs.
Just to say very briefly that Neshama from Rav Nachman and Pinchas should have an aliyah, and a Ruach Hashamim to Mrs. Sudak. Mrs. Sudak is more or less my senior cheder teacher in Cranage Road, going back over 60 years. Okay. I actually remember when Reb Nachman actually first came to England. I remember his wedding very clearly in the old Lubavitch house. It was then called OSE, and it was a very busy event at the time. And when Reb Nachman came, he was like a breath of fresh air to Anash in England, Anash in the United Kingdom, because he was like the Rebbe appointed him as a new young shliach to come over. And over the years, Baruch Hashem, he did a tremendous job, tremendous shlichus to help build up Lubavitch in the United Kingdom over all the many years. Yeah, and each and every one of us has, in some way, has to have a kos hatov to Rav Nachman, who did so much for Anash in the United Kingdom, and to grace Zach. Yeah, so we have to say l'chaim to all the Sudak family, and we should be zocha b'korov the v'kitzer rana sheichna ofa b'hu b'soicha. Okay, yeah. Just wanted to register.
Thank you, Rabbi Jacobs.
Okay.
Okay. If there's anyone else who wants to share, with pleasure.
I personally have a great feeling of Hakadosh Hatov. First of all, Shoma should have an aliyah, because I spent many, many years learning at the shir that Rabbi Sudak gave originally in the house in Portland Avenue, and then, of course, in Beis Lubavitch. And my memories are, well, yes, they go back a long way. But one thing I remember sure how much he put himself into these shurim, and was so dedicated to them, and would give up so many things to make sure that the shir took place and on time, and incredible effort he put into it, and also with the questions, always willing to answer questions at the share, and how he would stop in the middle of the share and think and spend time of try and find the perfect marshal to explain a particular Indian Chassidus, and this is what he was a master of this, of finding just the right marshal to explain the Indian that we were learning, and yeah, it was a very special experience learning with him. Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi David.
Thank you. If there's anyone else who wants to come up, you're welcome.
I just want to say, with
Otherwise,
regard
we'd
to
be
what
scheduled
David
to close in another
Segelman
few
said,
minutes.
it isn't just the shiurim Rabbi Sudak gave, but that he taught us how to learn and to have an absolute passion for it. That passion, that love, that intense longing that one feels the mimer, for example, is written for one personally. That is the legacy that Rabbi Sudak instilled into each and every one of us. Kol echad v'achas. And that is our legacy to pass on.
Thank you, Anderson.
Thank you.
Following on from Reb David's reminiscing about the Shir, so the Sunday night Shir, when I first came here in 1972, so it took place in the Sudak house in Portland Avenue, and I must say there was a very special atmosphere in that Shir. The people came from different areas of London. I remember Shimon Nemni, as Olga Zutzain, was a master scout who brought people from, what's the area where the Sephardi shul is? Not Belsize.
Bevis Marks?
Lauderdale Road.
Not Bevis Marks, no. Lauderdale
Road.
His father of Shalom was the shamus in the shul. And Shimon, he lived down there before, well, until they moved to Fursby Road. But he had connections with the shul over there, even when they lived in Fursby Road. And he used to bring people from the shul. Some people remember Mr. Shalom, Zichron Levracha, and people used to come from different areas, from Ilford and so on. And then sometimes there was a find. David Shalom Pape appeared. Different people have different versions of how he was recruited. Iki Suffering claims him, Herschel Pecker claims him, but whatever it was, he appeared with his sombrero one day, sometime in the 70s, those that know him. And there was this special atmosphere in the Shia. And I remember, I was not long since married, and I would come out of that Shia like walking on air, as if like, a second honeymoon, so to speak. His command of Hasidus was so total. There was nothing you could ask him that stumped him. And I'll just share an amusing incident. Maybe it's not so amusing for Reb Levi, but there was part of the atmosphere was that Levi, who was a boy at the time, probably only 12, 13, 14, whatever, and the custom arose of him making a tray of tea and coffee for the assembled in the front room there. I mean, it was packed tight with people because it's not such a big room. So he would, at some point in the I think that the shir was 8:30 till 10, I can't remember exactly the time. And then at some point, he would make the tray of coffee and tea and appear, this boy appearing at the door with this massive tray of the teas and the coffees. He probably knew by then what everybody wanted, with sugar, without sugar, tea, coffee, with milk, without milk, whatever it was. And he was only a boy, and you know, with coolly, you know, doing the job, bringing it in, and then everybody took their drinks. Anyway, one day, one evening, he was doing the same thing, and from the hallway there was this almighty crash, and he must have tripped on one of the stairs going up from the kitchen, and this whole tray smashed on the floor with everything in it. Rabbi Sudak did not bat an eyelid. He did not react at all. And he continued with the shir. He didn't jump up and say, well, you know what's a normal, you know, a normal person, everyone's a normal person, but yeah, a person who's not under control. What have you done, you know, and what happened? No.
He was the best China as well.
He was the best China as well. And he just continued with the shir. And Levi, to his credit, didn't panic. He just picked up the tray, mopped up the mess. I mean, I'm assuming this because we were inside the room. But anyway, about 10 minutes later, quarter of an hour later, the tray appears with the tea and the coffee, all as if nothing had happened. I don't know which crockery did you use for the second time round. We don't know. But that was an amusing incident, which illustrated how Rabbi said it was basically under control. You know, I'm in the middle of a shir, so you know, there's a crash in the hall. It's good. But that shir, and he combined the learning of Hasidus with telling of mises. I don't mean personal. I'm talking about reading mises. Mises from the Frierdiker Rebbe, Rishimus, you know, the Langer Brief. Yeah, these memories are engraved on my mind, in my mind. It made such a powerful impression. I remember gratefully to him an introduction to Tshuvas and Biurim, that the Rebbe's answers that he was giving before the Nasias, in which was the name of the magazine where the Rebbe, it was published. People would write in questions, and the Rebbe would answer it. Sorry?
Kovetz Lubavitch.
Kovetz Lubavitch. They're all in Igris now, but those answers appeared in a small softback sefer, Tshuvas and Biurim it was called. Two of them are about Tchias HaMesim. One of them is about Akavya ben Mahalalel, Ramotchai Baruch Mordechai Babrois, when he said that the Piate von Adavana Zogt, whole arichas, and these Rishimas of the Rebbe, he read them, we learned them, and they're engraved on my mind. So it was like a life changer, that shir. And I think everyone that attended it would agree that it was like being in yeshiva and you know, learning Hasidus from first principles in yeshiva. You could really become an expert in Hasidus from that shir. And my only regret is that after about 20 years, I stopped going. But nevertheless, anyway, l'chaim, and Riches Yomim V'Shonim to the family. And I just want to add that the Shem Tov connection for me goes right back to the very beginning. I'm sure some of the family know this because I have mentioned it a few times. When Rabbi Bensi Shem Tov, Zichron Livracha, used to travel around the country, and of course he came to Manchester, and he came to our shul, the Rabbi Dubav shul, where I was brought up. And he got talking to my father, Zichron Livracha, and my father had a severe medical problem, which he unburdened himself to Rabbi Bensi Shem Tov, and Rabbi Shem Tov said, "You must write to the Rebbe." And so my father said, "Well, how do you write to the Rebbe?" And he got him to write to the Rebbe, showed him how. My father was a very good Hebraist, and he wrote beautiful Hebrew. I've got the original letter which he sent to the Rebbe. And from that, there became a kesher michtovim with the Rebbe through Rebbe Shem Tov. And so to speak, you could say the rest is history. He also used to go around the country getting people to sign up for talks and tales. And Mrs. Sudak Seniors, he's all gesund sein, I wish her well now. Said she remembers writing my address in Manchester to send me talks and tales when I was a kid, and from Cranach Road. So my family connection with the wider family goes back a long way, and it's like, you can say, poetic that Rebbe Shem's son-in-law like continued running with the baton, so to speak. And we are, as a family, we are eternally grateful to the Sudaks, Rabbi and Mrs. Lahavdi Ben Chaim L'Chaim, for a lot of their advice and guidance, etc. So, good to Zichronos.
Thank you, Rabbi Ephraim.
Fair.
I'm sorry to have come late on this. I was giving a share, but I'd like to share one or two insights. I remember when I first began coming to Lubavitch, it was obvious that Reb Nachman, the Ephraim Potash, was a great man. It was clear he was someone very special. And one day, on the ground floor, where the sinks are, beyond the sinks, there's a kind of a broom cupboard. There's a cupboard for things for the cleaners to keep. And what had happened, what sometimes happens with such a cupboard, is a broom had fallen over. And because of that, the door wouldn't open. So there were three cleaners standing around. And Reb Nachman, in his shirt sleeves, lying on the floor, putting his arm into that broom cupboard in order to get the broom up so that the door would open. And I thought, that's mamash dedication. You know, that's the godless, a great rabbi, an important person. The moised has to run, and in order for the moised to run, you have to get the broom cupboard open, and therefore you have to take off your kapota and lie down on the floor and get the broom up. And that made a very, very strong impression on me. The whole idea of complete bittul to the Indian I didn't formulate it necessarily in quite those terms, but I understood the idea of bittul in that sense, and that was very striking. And then at a certain point, I was giving shiurim in Braslav, Rabbi Nachman of Braslav's thought. And there was a person called Mordechai Beck, he lives now in Yerushalayim, and he used to come to my shir. And he used to say to me, you know what? You'd really like Nachman's shir. So Nachman, there's Nachman of Braslav and Rabbi Nachman Sudak. So Mordechai Beck saying, you know, every time, you know, week in, week, you'd really like Nachman's shir. So finally I went along to Nachman's shir. And going along to Rabbi Sudak's shir in his home was the most amazing, amazing experience. He'd just begun learning Hechol Tzurana of the Rebbe Rashab. It was the most amazing thing. And me and Yaakov Kora, we would learn that together, be in the shir. Then we would go home to my house, and we were in Listria Park at that time, and we would go over what we'd learned, and it was the most incredible experience. Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem.
Thank you.
I'd like to repeat of an amazing words I heard from your Zayda. I told your father many, many years ago in Fabrengen, you know, you never know what resonates with an individual. And one deaf ears to another. I was at the Fabrengen and making my usual hullabaloo. And Yezeda was telling over a moshel, a very, very powerful moshel that I never forgot. He said, a person could be like one of two people. He's the kind of person that goes into a house and he looks at all the fine arts and the pictures and the antiques that are there. So he's a fine art collector. Or there's another kind of person. He goes behind the house and he roots around in the garbage to see what rubbish has been discarded. He says, he's a garbage man. And then he concluded, said, what we take in from an individual doesn't say anything about that individual. Because everyone has fine art. And everyone has stuff that they discard. He said, what we take away from another individual says everything about us. Do we choose to be a fine art collector or a garbage man? Anyway, so I found that a very powerful thought. Years later, in another Gilgal, I was asked to do an interview. For whatever reasons, it was in connection with the Yovel of the Jewish Boy Scouts. They wanted me to do it with the head of the conservative movement who was speaking to the Boy Scout. Anyway, I did get the interview with him. I did the interview, we did the article. But the conclusion of the interview, he says, no. He said, do you have any, I have to speak to 2,000 children, members of the conservative movement this Shabbos. He says, do you have anything I could say to them? So I told him over this thought, and he was very, very nispal. He said, it's hashgacha pratis, because that encapsulates exactly the point I would like to make. I said, there's only one thing. I said, you have to say over in the name of the person I heard it from, in the name of Rabbi Nachman Sudak. And he said that. And please God, Yezaida's influence should continue and go on, please God, and until we see him back with us with the Melech HaMashiach. L'chaim, l'chaim, neshama, zo haben an aliyah.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.